Welcome to this conversation. It's Reclaim to Transform initiative, and we're at the hybrid habitat, which is the first series called the Chrysalis. So we're going to talk about material innovation, cultural repair, and participation, and how we storytell that. So I'd just like to welcome you all on this country and just want to pay my deepest respects to the Wurundjeri country that we're on. The sovereignty has never been ceded. I'd also like to pay respects to my elders in Quandamooka, with my descendants in Quandamooka, North and South Stradbroke Island, and Moreton Bay, Dolphin people and Carpet Snake people, and also Mununjali with Wedgetail Eagle people. So thank you so much for joining us. Anyone is welcome to come on in, take a seat, pull up some grass, take shoes off as well. Like me, I feel like I need to do that and ground. And we're going to get started with this amazing conversation. And I'm really excited to introduce you to these amazing people that have been involved in this work and are weaving their way into the world of UnitePlayPerform. So I'm really honored to have you both here and the people on the screen, and we'll talk about you guys in a second. I'd just like to introduce Reclaim to Transform initiative. So it's launching here at Melbourne Design Week in 2026, curated by the National Gallery Victoria. Especially a big thanks to Timothy Moore, the curator for design and architecture, for believing in this work and having us here, presented by UnitePlayPerform Studio, which is my arts health organisation. I'm the artist behind this, alongside some incredible people here that have contributed to this work. My name's Melissa Gilbert, and I am First Nations. I live in Blue Mountains in Lura, and this is all about deprogramming the habits and behaviours that perpetuate extractive systems of creative production. And through storytelling, I'm tracing both the internal and external journey of my artistry and design practice, inviting us all to consider that waste does not exist, only materials without relationship. In this framing, discarded matter is not an endpoint, but material with the potential to be reauthored through care, collaboration, and cultural intention. In doing so, I'm reimagining materials as valuable resources, catalysts for systemic change in design processes, and agents of broader cultural shifts. Positioned as both practice and provocation, Reclaim to Transform explores how we design, make, and relate through material, behaviour, and interdependence. The Melbourne Design Week launch marks the public release of the initiative, and I'm sharing my steps towards the Symbiocene, which is a long way off. I'm going to be transparent about this journey, but I want to get there through decision-making processes and the evolution of three major projects. Alongside this journey, I have partners and systems shaping, who are system shaping in the development of this. So this Unity Web is a very special piece for me. As a proud First Nations woman, it was my coming out of the closet. It was a very big and emotional work for me to speak into my my lineage, and yeah, it's huge for me. I got to learn the fishing net style. I wove my first piece of weaving, which is 4 meters underneath here. And I invited and asked for permission for these beautiful women around so-called Australia to weave their stories into this work. And on the day of the referendum, all of the weavings came back in the post, as they do with Indigenous ways. It's a slow and steady process, and you just can't rush it. And they all came down in that same day, and I wove them all together. And it was a real privilege to do that on that day. The next inception was the elemental sigils. So I started to engage my First Nations weaving into the closed loop circuit plastic with DEFY design and make the elemental sigils. And what they represent is, especially in this space, it's so perfect. They're mapped north, south, east, west. And in the middle, the axis mundi is the tree. Earth, the everything that lives and where everything comes from, the compass. So that tall tree right there just means so much to this work. And what it's about, why it's mapped in the compass, is because my elders that I work with, also in the States, from the Diné to the Shoshay and Hopi and Kogi elders, they all talk about walking in a circle instead of a straight line. So when we're in a Western world, we walk in a straight line, and that means we can just discard and leave relationships behind. We can leave trash behind. We can leave our choices behind, and we won't see them again. But when we walk in a circle, where it's an invitation to come back around full circle, seasonally, conceptually, astrologically, planetarily, to come back around and meet your relationships that haven't been tended to meet the materials that haven't been chosen well, to meet the things that need to be tended to so that you can move forward and grow and do better and be a part of the interconnectedness and the weaving of the world and the earth. So these are all about getting people familiar with what earth means, what air means, and all the correspondences that lean into them too. It's a really playful way to kind of engage in that as well. So that's where the elemental sigil started. And then we moved to the chrysalis, which has been my biggest, well, our biggest work to date. And I think for me, it was a real challenge in many ways to consider and work with partners, considering time as an artist. I had 30 days planned to construct after the frame was made, and I was in hospital in emergency for 9 days and had 4 days to make this. So I had to lean into a lot of makers to help me make this happen for Design Week a couple of weeks ago. So there's a lot of things to consider in how to build right relationship, and there's a lot of factors and roadblocks that will stop us along the way. But we're here to talk about that as conversation as well. I'm a provocateur and a disruptor, and so this conversation is not going to be a normal conversation. We're going to have a provocation that we all kind of discuss. There might be tension points, and we'll see what happens. So without further ado, I would love to introduce you to both the online guests and the guests that are here in the flesh. So if you'd like to just share a little bit about yourself, who you are, and yeah.
Hello, I'm Glenn Albrecht.
So by the way, Glenn is the biggest legend on the planet. He's like the David Attenborough of the Symbiocene. It's such an honor to have him here. Give it up for Glenn Albrecht, please.
Thank you.
Really is.
I'm a bit rough around the edges. I've been bitten by mosquitoes and biting flies because I've just been in the Northern Territory. My son Anthony got a PhD from Charles Darwin University, and we attended the ceremony. And he also performed at the ceremony for the graduands and then graduates. So I'm fly bitten, a bit tired, but I'm really pleased to be here today. I'm an environmental philosopher, but environmental is not the term I prefer to use. I'm a philosopher of symbiosis. So I actually have to create a category of philosophy for myself and others who wish to be informed and inspired by the idea and the science of symbiosis. So I've created my own philosophy. It's called symbioism, and it's called sum because in the ancient Greek, transliterated properly, sum is the origin of symbiosis, and it means living together, partnership, companionship. So that for me is the starting point for a philosophy based on the bioscience of symbiosis. I had a career as an academic at Newcastle University, where I taught environmental science and management students, ethics to doctors, nurses, and allied health professionals. And then after 20 years of doing that and thousands of wonderful students, went to Murdoch University for 5 years, where I was professor of sustainability at Murdoch. While I was there, I was also caring for my elderly mum. I'm a West Aussie, and so her last 5 years of life were spent in my care at Jarrahdale in Perth. So growing up in Perth, it's the most isolated capital city in the world. As you grow up, you really want to get out of it as quickly as possible, and that applied to me. But before I left, I acquired this endemic sense of place, the idea that where you are is so unique, so wonderful in its intricacies, in its complexity, that it leaves an indelible impression on you that you carry for the rest of your life. And so when I moved from Perth to Newcastle, I had to create a new sense of place for myself. And I did so easily because Australia has so many wonderful, what we would call ecosystems, biomes, geological forces at work, that I very quickly developed a new sense of place. But it was challenged by the Upper Hunter and the open cut coal mining, where I developed the concept of solastalgia. If you haven't heard of it before, the quick definition is the homesickness you have when you're still at home and your home leaves you. So you're in your farmhouse or your community, and the worst neighbour from hell moves in next door, and it happens to be Rio Tinto or BHP with a 100 square kilometre open cut coal mine. So as a result, my sense of place about the beauty of the Hunter region was challenged by some of the largest extractive parasitic forces on Earth. And so as a consequence, I moved into this domain, which I call the psychoterratic, psycho of the mind, terratic of the earth. And so I've created this domain within which to work as a creative thinker, contributing what I hope will be to a future that's going to be worth living in, particularly for our children and those who are growing up in a world that right now looks pretty scary and pretty threatening. And so my response in the last few years has been the idea of the Symbiocene, and this is where Missy and I collaborate, the vision of a future which is the outcome of collaborative, mutually beneficial work across species in a way that's either minimizing extraction because we're not putting it back into a toxic form, or we're beginning to think about how do we live with other life forms in a way which is not toxic, which is not extractive. And so my work as a philosopher is now moving me in that direction. And I've just completed a book last week called The Symbiocene, Our Only Future. And so as a result, we hopefully will have from Cornell University Press a book which is a follow-up to my previous one called Earth Emotions. The Symbiocene, Our Only Future is, one of these crazy philosophical efforts on the part of an individual that lives very close to Missy and Blackheath in the Blue Mountains to totally reconstruct the way humans relate to the earth. Thank you.
Thank you. What an honour. We're absolutely honoured to have Patricia Chircop here from KNOVUS. And I'm so excited for you to hear about her incredible journey and what she does. So thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for contributing to this work and for teaching me along the way, the hard road. But it's been incredible, and thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here. Yay.
Thanks, Missy. Thanks for the opportunity. Yeah. It's been quite an interesting pathway together. So I'm a specialist in 3D knitting, zero waste, and I've got a practice in Carlton, so feel free to visit. I'm also doing a PhD in UTS entitled Hyperlocal Manufacturing with the Application of 3D Knitting, which is really proposing that we can manufacture locally wherever we are if we have the right technology. Thanks. It seems really loud to me, actually. I'm proposing that we can manufacture locally wherever we are if we have the right technology through automation and systems, which allows us to respond much more to geopolitical crisis, environmental crisis, and things like that. So I guess I'm coming from quite a different angle where my application is quite commercial. But for me, we can propose all of these things, but it's really about behaviour change at the end of the day. And that's not only from stakeholders, but that's from consumers as well. Yeah, so I'll probably leave it there. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much. We'll get into some gorgeous provocations together and keep continuing through to our live on screen. So we've got Ron Bakker here, and it's an honour to also have you here because for some little scruff bag artist like me to be in the vicinity of all of your minds, it's really a super honor to continue our conversations together. Ron and myself and Glenn are just starting to weave our way into conversation quite a lot and really enjoying where we're heading. So yeah, welcome, Ron, and I'd love you to share a little bit about yourself and what you're up to and where you're heading.
Thank you, Missy. It's very nice to be here on your sunny afternoon in Melbourne. The sun's just coming up here in London. It's promising to be a beautiful day, so I'm happy I got up so early to witness it and to speak to all of you. As Glenn was talking about growing up in Australia, I just thought of my own upbringing. I was born in the Netherlands. I am a Dutchman. I have lived in London for 40 years, but the Dutch thing never leaves you. And I'm struggling with it, especially the last few years, realizing that my country is fully engineered. It is a place that people have been shaping for 1,000 years, fighting the seas and rearranging rivers. And the Dutch landscape is all culture. There is nothing in the country, nature-wise, that wasn't planned and planted by people. And as I grew up, I didn't know that, and I felt that my forest was like a proper forest, but it turned out to be a plantation. The Dutch are quite sure that they can engineer their way out of any trouble. And in fact, that's kind of what we've done for 1,000 years. So it sits deeply in my brain. So I'm coming from the other end. I need to learn that I am part of nature, and I need to learn that I am by doing my work as an architect. I'm partly shaping this relationship with the planet. So I'm an architect. I founded a company called PLP Architecture some time ago. I work with people from all over the planet. We work kind of all over the planet. Our work takes us currently to Tokyo, Singapore, cities in India, the Middle East, and London and Europe. So we make buildings in different cultures. We learn every time we go somewhere. We learn a lot about those cultures. And Missy calls herself a disruptor, and I've sort of decided about 10 years ago I need to also disrupt my circles. So I'm trying very much to do that. I call myself an activist architect sometimes, not so much that I am an activist. I just feel that I ought to be, because we're in such a pickle. The architecture does a lot there. We create 40% of the carbon emissions with buildings and other construction. We're also a terribly slow-moving industry. So when we set out to do something, excuse me, we have set ways that are really, really hard to adjust and to change. So I've been talking to people in my industry about this change, and I have used everything I can to make people aware of the fact that they have responsibilities that go much beyond the building they are looking at, or the drawing they are making, or the wall that they are building. There is a relationship with society, and there is a relationship with climate, and this is pretty fresh. You know, we have been as an industry working against nature pretty strongly for I would say maybe 150 years or something. In the last 50 years, it's ramped up to be an industry that really damages the face of the earth. As an architect, I I can sometimes get excited about buildings, but mostly I think cities are very ugly and they're pretty unhappy places for many people. We make modern architecture that we carefully put together as if it was some kind of art. But in fact, if you ask most people who have a choice of three things, one is a modern building, one is a classic building, and one is a tree. Most people will prefer the tree over any of the three. And then secondly, the classic building, and lastly, the modern building. So we're not doing so great as an industry. So in about 15 years ago, 10 years ago, I designed a building in Amsterdam called The Edge. It's an office building, very large office building. And it was at the time the most sustainable office building in the world. And Bloomberg also said it was possibly the smartest because it used new technologies, digital technologies, to support comfort in the building and life in the building for people, and also connect that to the energy flows of the building and the physical comfort of the space. So pretty smart building, I think. I'm sure we can do better, but at the time it was quite remarkable, and it set me on a path of sort of reconsidering where we were. And along that path, I started an organization inside my company, PLP Architecture. We started PLP Labs, which is a small team of people that kind of find the edges of architecture and work out which bits we don't understand well enough. And then we find people that we can work with to change that. And that's been quite amazing. We do the weirdest stuff. We do a lot of work to do with the perception of space. How do people feel in buildings and in cities? We work on transport systems, and we invent new materials occasionally, and we try. And all of this is against the background of trying to understand the larger scheme of things, and where do we go? Where are we? How does it all work? And what ought to be our goals? And along those lines, we've been working with mycelium as a material, or as a way of making pieces of material that one might use in construction. So we make blocks and shapes, and we've been pretty clever about it, making them look beautiful and finding novel ways to get an organism to collaborate with waste and make solids. And that's been great. And along the line, one of my colleagues picked up a conversation with Glenn online, and Glenn called our work a Symbiocene demonstrator. And that kind of totally piqued my interest, because suddenly this sort of little laboratory inside our office making shapes out of mycelium started to become part of a way of thinking. And ever since that moment, maybe 3 years ago, we've joined this Symbiocene direction, and you know, this is going to take a while. This is a very slow industry, as I said, but we're starting to find some traction, and for us it helps very much to be able to talk about these things, and Glenn's made the words for it, and I think once you know, the words are probably what connects our minds to the realities around us in some way. And I feel that words very much are helping me understand the bigger picture. So we're very grateful for that. And we are doing our best. I think ideally our industry would be completely reimagined, because it's hopelessly unable to deal with our realities on the planet. But it's a long way, and the hope is that I spend a lot of time with younger people, younger architects. I teach a bit when I can. I give space to younger architects in our office a lot, and they kind of already know a few things that I did not know when I was their age. So there is definitely a shift happening. I'm doing my best to help shape that somehow as much as I can. So very excited to be here with Missy, your beautiful object behind you. I'm sorry I can't sit in it a little bit, but
We wish you were here.
yeah.
Thank you so much for that amazing integration for us all to hear about where you've been and the edge. It's just incredible work, and we're so honored to have your vision and thoughts and mind here today in this provocation. So thank you, Ron. And we've got Sam Davies, who is the chief legend at DEFY Design, who it's such an honor to work with you, and who comes from two legendary artists, mum and dad, who have shaped Sam to be able to manage the vision of what we did together, and it was such an incredible journey. So thank you so much. I'd love to hear about you and the work you do at DEFY Design, which is all the closed loop circuit plastic behind you that you can see here. Just introducing Sam.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, my name's Sam Davies. I'm one of the founders from DEFY, and my background's in product design and industrial design. And basically I did my stint creating consumer products, and very quickly got disenchanted in, we don't need another kettle, don't need more coffee machines, we kind of got that sorted. And so I took a big detour, went into bush regeneration, started doing bush care, did that for a few years. And I kept returning back to the same sites and finding trash that we'd have to pull out each time. And it made me realize that I was too far down the supply chain. And, by the time it gets into the bush, it's too late. It needs to get intercepted before then. And so basically it led me to have this realization that, humans, all of us here, we all love making things. We live in amazing cities and houses and drive cars. And so how do you make things in a way that the earth can support? And that then led me to get back into product design and create DEFY. And so it's in the name, but DEFY is also a form of resistance. And it's great to sit here along a panel of activists and disruptors. But essentially the aim is to defy the path to landfill. So that's where the name came from. And at DEFY, we basically have a big factory where we accept plastic waste, we wash it, we shred it, and we manufacture it into a bunch of products. And it was an awesome brief from Melissa to try turn, milk bottles and packaging wrap and shampoo bottles into these amazing structures and artworks. And yeah, I think the main inspiration behind the business was everyone supports recycling. Lots of people want to find, responsible ways to get rid of their waste, but everyone is trying to put it in a bin, and there's not a lot of thought as to what happens after that. And so our concept was to try create the business that was missing, which is essentially to turn it back into stuff. And so we have an in-house kind of design, manufacturing, equipment, and all under one roof. And what we've realized is that when you get those really tight feedback loops, you can create some pretty awesome products and pretty awesome things. And you can also build relationships that mean that they come back to you. And I'm of the same shared opinion with Patricia that I think manufacturing locally and forming relationships is going to be the key to sustainable material custodianship. And so the idea of DEFY is that there's a factory like ours in each location, and that we collect local waste and we manufacture local product. But yeah, that's what we do, and really keen to get into some discussions.
Amazing. Thank you so much, everyone. So before we start, I want to just do a little bit of UPPing. So if everyone can get up, because we've all been walking around or sitting down for 20 minutes so far, and just do a little bit of a shakedown. So just follow me. big step down, flicking the hand, bit of a jump. Getting the hands above the head and let it go. Big voice out. One more time. One more. Bit more wiggle. Flat down. But the time we're doing some somatic work because this is all about getting past the body from thinking into feeling and doing. Nice. Does everyone feel a little bit better? Bit more in their bodies? Great. So the first provocation that we have, and I guess I just wanted to just kind of transition that intro into, this sentence. So this work has only become possible through relationships, collaborations, and material dialogues across multiple disciplines. The initiative is not presenting finished answers, nor is this conversation. It is presenting an ongoing inquiry into how we design, make, relate, and participate differently. So the first provocation we have for our guests is going to be like 2 to 3 minutes each, kind of have a jam at the end. Is this: waste does not exist, only materials without relationship. So I'd love to, whoever feels like they want to kind of jump in first, you're welcome to kind of speak to that from your lens.
Well, from my lens, actually, I design waste out of the process. So my whole practice is about not creating waste to start with. That is also coming through with my PhD, where I am saying, let's just make what we need. I'm involved in a lot of industry discussions, and we have many kind of forums around sustainability. And whenever I'm in a fashion context around that, I am like, why don't we just promote people to buy less? And in that, I mean, consume less and be more considered in how we produce and understand our relationships to the material. So for me, it's just about don't create waste in the start. I mean, the clothes I'm wearing are probably 10 years old. I buy considered when I buy them. I'll buy a higher quality. Yes, it's polyester, I'll admit, but I don't wash it, whereas my zero waste merino wool top that I made, I'm considering everything that I'm purchasing. I don't dress for fashion. I don't worry about the trends. And so for me, I think waste definitely exists, and I don't think it's necessarily about the relationship to the material, but it's about our behavior to how we consume and we engage with the material. So I agree with your premise around, what you're saying. It is definitely about your relationship with it, but it's also about your relationship with your mindset far before the material's even created, I think.
But awesome. Ron, Sam?
Yeah. Oh, you go, Ron. Yeah.
No, go for it.
Go.
Yeah. I mean, for us, very much so, waste is something very different. And, for us, waste is our feedstock. So our business doesn't run if there's not waste. And so we definitely don't call it waste. It's a feedstock for us. And very early on in our journey, we got this analogy where, people who are running garbage trucks or recycling systems are above ground miners. And I love the idea that you're looking for resources, around where you can. And I think the biggest thing is, a plastic bottle in the ocean isn't necessarily waste. It's just in the wrong spot, because if that plastic becomes an insulator for an electric vehicle, engine component, then that's supporting the transition to renewables. And so I think for us, it's all about tracking materials and tracking resources. And I think labeling it as waste inherently discards it. And I think, there's got to be a change in perception. And I think even just the concept of, oh, that's just waste. Well, it's like you're kind of giving yourself a green pass. And similar to Patricia's approach, where it's like, well, let's design that out and let's make sure that it's always returning as something new. And I think that's definitely where the world needs to go to.
Thanks, Sam. That's awesome. Above ground mining.
And in a way, we do that too in architecture. Our products are supposed to last on paper 50 years or something. In reality, they ought to, of course, last hundreds of years, and we can do that, as we know. Buildings can last a long time, but in practice, the buildings we create today are probably likely to be, a lot of them are likely to be not needed anymore in 20 or 25 years, because economic systems move activity from one place to the other. We're left with buildings that we can't use. And the industry has been pushed by our own thinking and by understanding the changes that are needed in the larger picture, but also by new regulations from cities and authorities to be more careful with what we create and not create what we don't need to create, and also to make sure that the materiality of the buildings we create can be reused. So this has now become slowly a reality in some parts of Europe, where we design buildings to be disassembled, for the elements to not be stuck together with glue, but bolted together or nailed together, so we can take them apart after 25 years and use the elements. And buildings are increasingly made with materials that have been recycled from old buildings, which is great. But this process of recycling is, we're trying to force it to get closer to nature by growing materials that can be used for construction. And we do this quite actively. And I'm saying we, it's not me and my friends. It's a piece of the industry that's moving that way. We're making cladding panels now that are 100% bio-based or made from waste, and that comply with the regulations and requirements for construction materials. You can buy them; they're not even very much more expensive than traditional materials that are mined. And there is a thing happening in architecture called localism as well, where we're trying to work out how regionally materials can be created that are appropriate for that region, and that are made from crops that remediate soil conditions. So the picture is getting closer to the circularity of nature. And indeed, a lot of the materials we are inventing at the moment can be recycled by nature. They will compost on the forest floor, if you like. That if in our dreams, if the construction industry could be part of this nature cycle, I think we'll have solved the problem on the one hand. On the other hand, we probably, and this is my guess and my wish, would create a type of architecture that feels a lot better than the concrete and plastic and steel that we have gotten used to make our buildings from. If you take natural materials and weave them, or materials where you can still see their natural structure, there is a biophilic component to that just makes people happier and concentrate better and be more productive. And this picture seems to be a little bit of a science fiction story at the moment, but looking around, it's actually happened bit by bit. And I think that's really uplifting.
That's amazing. And I love when we were in conversation about the conversation the other night, we were talking about building and that change in language to building and harvesting, which I found really fascinating with Glenn on the language shift, and thinking about the Symbiocene and how birds create a nest and then they'll take the discarded nest parts and make another nest, or another animal like a caterpillar will weave it into a chrysalis, for example. And I really love that idea about the language shift in this process, and having granddaddy of Symbiocene, to kind of guide us with our language too, and that words have weight and they're medicine as well. So I just wanted to introduce that essence as well behind what we're doing. And you know, I'm experiencing this in my own world as well with you know, how it say something and not to do something, and the repercussions of that are far beyond your own self. So yeah, I wanted to jam that out with you and see what you've got. Juicy stuff to go.
Juicy is right.
Yeah.
Earthworms love organic waste, you know, so the relationship is a good one. If it smells and if it's good food for earthworms, then we've actually got a positive concept of waste. If it's toxic and kills earthworms, then it's obviously not a good positive relationship. It's incredibly parasitic and negative. And so I agree with Ron that if we can begin to shift our materials base from that which is extracted, polluting, the age that we're in now, I call it petronecrophilia. We're actually in love with dead carbon. I want us to shift out of petronecrophilia into symbiophilia, where we actually fall in love with living carbon. And that living carbon becomes part of the materials cycle that we need to live as in a visualization instead of a civilization, of viva, life. So my idea is not in the present, it's in a future that I do believe we're in the process of creating. I think organic form, recycling, all of these things are important stops or stages along the way to having an economy. I call it a symbonomy. It's not oikos, which means the management of the household. It's symbios, which means living together. And when you begin to think about waste as a living relationship, when you pee in the morning, it's into a bioreactor that converts your nitrogen into electricity. All of a sudden, you've got a new form of animism. Instead of being alienated from life, every single action that you have is either producing organic compost from your composting toilet or electricity from your own urine. And so could you imagine that, getting up in the morning and feeding your friendly bacteria a bit of nitrogen and having a little chat to them as they produce the electricity that starts running the nano voltage energy system of your house? That's the kind of thinking that takes me out of the Anthropocene, this period of human dominance, into the Symbiocene, which is the period where humans reintegrate with the rest of life. And so my work is about critiquing the Anthropocene, because that's what we're in. We realistically have to start from that base. But in my view, the Anthropocene doesn't have a future because it's anti-physics and it's anti-biology. We come from microorganisms in a long series, like 4 billion years worth of evolution, from microscopic things to macroscopic things, tiny things to big things. And we thought we were separate and superior to all those little things. But have I got news for you via the biologists? We actually are Vestlians. We've still got these tiny creatures inside us. Some of them enable us to retain health in our gut microbiome, which is now well known. But the rest of them are actually part of our reproductive systems. There is a microbiome of the eye. We are living creatures called holobionts, multiple organisms all living together. So until we start seeing this idea of life as a flow, we're not going to really get the idea of waste as a good thing. When we see our waste as gold, as the material of life consumed by others to produce more life, we're not going to get it. Indigenous people did so indigenously because that's the only option they had to live. The rest of us have to relearn it. So it's not about being more than human. It's about rehumaning ourselves. We are vestalians, we are holobionts, we are all sorts of things that are not human. And so that humbles, it's a very humbling perception of what it is to be a human being in the complexity, diversity, and majesty of life.
Love it. And just to add to that as well, yeah, please round of applause. Yo, so beautiful. Yeah, I just want to add to that as well. Like I'm thinking, you know, about what waste was for me, because I don't want to use that word anymore. But I think like as a ritualist as well, yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, sure, totally. But I think, I don't know, materials for me, and even elements, that, especially the work that I do and the tactility, but as a ritualist as well, you know, I'm working with elements a lot. And I think there's some really simple things that we can do to just help us navigate building right relationship with things. Like, for example, one thing I've sort of deprogrammed myself to do is drink the tap water out of my tap and wash my hair with that and use that water for ritual processes and whatever. But I found a spring in near my house. I'm really lucky I live in the Blue Mountains, but I had a friend who used to drive from Sydney or catch the train and go to this beautiful spot and collect all of her water and take it back with her on trips to the mountains in the bushwalking. And that relationship building with water really changed the way that I appreciated that element. And I built a really clean, beautiful relationship with water because of that process of going and collecting it. So I just wanted to kind of throw that in there in the mix with that first provocation, that, you know, we all have the opportunity to slow down into deep time, which is an Indigenous term, and really start to see what simple things we can engage with. Some really amazing human told me once that you don't have to learn about the whole ecology. You can just choose one tree and see how the seasons change around it and with it, and what birds or life it has, and symbiotically aligning with it and building relationship with that. So I think just thinking about that as we kind of dive deeper into these next provocations as well. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think actually this relationship is that distant from where we've been. I think
Yeah.
from my Mediterranean culture, this is only one. My grandparents were doing this kind of stuff. They were much
Yeah.
more connected. So I think this is also like a very culturally local kind of take on how we do use resources and our connections, you
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
Yeah, it's really nice to hear everyone saying keeping and moving through that localism, and, you know, really love that. Thank you. Next provocation. Da, da, da. Sustainability is an outdated theory absorbed into the very systems it was meant to disrupt. So that's the provocation. Sustainability is an outdated theory absorbed into the very systems it was meant to disrupt. And just thinking about that, this is just an open conversation. There is no right or wrong, and there is just you know, dialogue about this. So yeah, anyone want to kick off?
I'd be keen to talk to this.
Yeah, and welcome to speak up as well. I've got quite a bit of wine time happening in the background, so go for it. Yeah.
Yeah, great. But yeah, for me, I think sustainability as a objective was great and helped us make a big transition, I guess, after a huge period of industrialism. And I think it put us on the path to start looking at stabilizing all our natural systems. And I think for me, sustainability is an end point. So sustainability is a status you want to achieve. And I think for me, it's used a lot as, you know, it's more sustainable. And I think that phrase more sustainable sits on such a big spectrum. And so, you know, something that's more sustainable could be still so unsustainable, but because it's a step in the right direction, you know, it feels like something to celebrate. And I think it's really hard to know when we are sustainable, you know, when are we stable? And I think going back to that conversation we had a second ago about the move to localism, I think a big part of that is the data that we've been getting around sustainability is so hard to engage with. You know, when people talk about carbon emissions, it's so tricky to visualize what that means and if we're saving enough. But when you go, you know, there's my compost and there's my veggie patch, or when you go, you know, there's that bottle I just finished, and here's the new bottle I just made with that old bottle. It becomes so direct. And I think part of that localism is obviously reducing carbon miles and stuff like that. But I think for me, it's about engaging with the tangibility of seeing it all balance out. And so I think for me, sustainability has diluted the conversation a bit too far.
Thanks, Sam. Anyone want to bounce off that one?
Well, I think I
Love.
provoked Missy with this one around the dinner table one night. But
Yeah.
the problem is the word sustain what? It has no content. And so it can be filled with any kind of content you like. As a result, we've had 20 or 30 years of sustainability ranging from the work of incredibly well-intentioned, virtuous people at one end of the spectrum to a bunch of people at the other who want to use the word to sustain whatever brutalizing activity they wish to perpetuate on the planet. Now, that's a spectrum which I find intolerable. And as a retired professor of sustainability, I felt that my career as a professor of sustainability was a complete failure. So I have to put that out as a provocation as well. My students would learn about principles of sustainability and go out into a world that didn't practice them ever. And they would become so disillusioned with their work. So that's part of my reason for thinking about shifting to concepts that actually have a content. So many of our well-used words in the domain of nature might be another one, have no content which humans can emotionally relate to. And so as a result, I'm working on putting emotion back into our language so that the content actually has an emotional engagement with the very thing that you're trying to save or talk about.
Thank you, Glenn.
Yeah, I think sustainability for me is a practice. Like, it's so greenwashed in the fashion industry and things like that. But I guess, as Sam did, it's about defining what sustainability, and like you've done, what sustainability is actually to each of us. So I think for me, it's just about a practice, it's so many different things to so many different people that I think we just need to embody what we can in order to have a practice in whatever way our life can, because we're never going to get it all right. Yeah. But I think as long as we're moving towards the thinking. But yeah, I mean, the greenwashing of the word has made it irrelevant, which is a shame because it is a definition in itself. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that. That's awesome. Ron.
I'm gonna debate this with you guys because I actually think
finally.
I think the word sustainability has had its day, but it's done a lot actually, and I've been practicing some sort of sustainability in architecture for 30 years now, and it goes through stages. And 30 years ago, we were talking amongst engineers, I think, about this wild idea called sustainability, which really had nothing to do with anything. It was an unconnected word. But it was gathering elements to its meaning that have been developed over these 3 decades into a very different type of responsibility that buildings have now. And it's baby steps, it's the first steps, but the word sustainability has carried this with it. The meaning of the word is the wrong word. I mean, we called it green architecture initially. That was also the wrong word. And because there was, it wasn't to do with the color. And it was, but it was the initial thinking about energy in buildings, orientation, using the sunlight and the daylight in right proportions, and designing buildings to catch the airflows that you need for people to breathe. Those kind of things became part of the architectural the modern architectural version of making buildings. Of course, these elements were very well understood around the world in indigenous architecture and in various parts of the world. But in modern architecture, they were reinvented about 30 years ago. This was not appreciated by our clients. You can imagine our clients poo-pooing this whole idea because it costs money and they don't need it. And that has changed in the last 30 years. So 10 years after that first period, 20 years ago, the clients were saying, oh yeah, you know, you used to tell me about this stuff 10 years ago. I had no idea what you were talking about, but now I'm starting to see it. And then the accreditation systems came. There was LEED and BREEAM and Gold Star and all the different ways of measuring sustainability and accreditation that people started to need. You know, they were told they needed it. ESG came along. The Paris Agreement was signed. People were told by the discussion that they had a responsibility for these things, and the pension funds started worrying about the value of their property becoming related to this sustainability word. So I think the word has had its day. We should bring it further into a future that is smarter and more sophisticated. On the one hand, on the other hand, these seem sometimes to be opposing forces. We need not forget what we already know, because we do know quite a lot, and this knowledge is sometimes not written down in accreditation systems or in technological textbooks, but we understand actually very well what we need to do because we've grown up with nature, and we've grown up with weather and with heat and with prevailing winds. It's we know how to deal with it, and so the discussion needs ramping up, which I think that's what we're all doing here. I am, you know, this is the Dutchman. I'm an engineer, okay? I can work with whatever I get. I can make it more productive. I can protect it against the waves, not a problem. Actually, that's not the case. You know, the Netherlands should not be where it is. It's a delta, you know, it's wetland, and it doesn't look like that. 18 million people live there, and that's because they've engineered it. So I'm trying to create a picture where I am in two places. I am with the engineers. I am also totally with indigenous knowledge. The combination of that is powerful. And if we start to understand how things relate to each other, and we create language for it, and we create image for it, and aesthetic for it, then I think that's where the progress potentially lies.
Thanks, Ron. Yeah, I really love the idea of designing for interdependence and thinking about that word and what interdependence means. And I think that's up to the individual to really, like you said, Patricia, embody their ethos, their values, their vision, their methods. And I think that takes slowing down into deep time, which is really hard to do in a world that is trying to make us ramp up so heavily into the fast-paced, quick decision-making. And I think just to add to that, you know, how can we check in with ourselves and embody responsive behaviors versus reactive behaviors? And maybe it all starts in the body. So thought to word to deed to action, and that process, which is First Nations knowledge of starting with deep feeling and sensing and checking in versus thinking and actioning and reacting. And I think there's a real message in that embodiment piece. But also, how many people are spending the time to kind of investigate and look at their own ethos and values and methods and vision beyond branding for their businesses or their businesses that they work for, And I think that's a really big piece that I'm always pulling myself up on is reframing my ethics and values and methods and kind of iterating them seasonally. Every 3 months, I look at them, I assess them. My words have weight too. And it's a really helpful tool for me to use in the process of trying to get to the Symbiocene, which for me, I'm, really honestly and transparently a long way from. But this is the activation and the disruption tool to mechanize, to provoke the storytelling of how far an artist like me is from that as well. So I really appreciate that provocation from everyone and how everyone responded to it.
But at least you're trying to put it in practice.
Yes.
Because we can create
Thank
many
you.
different theories and you might get it right and you might get it wrong, but you're really trying to put it in practice. And I think that's essential when we're developing new theories and new concepts and, putting other ones out is like, how do we actually just embody and practice what we preach,
Yeah. And I think as well with that, the harm piece for me, the violence of taking and making, and like I call it violence, it's violent to buy and waste and do, and I do it too. But how can we kind of reduce that harm of how we choose materials, how we work with materials, how we practice with them? And I think that's an independent responsibility and accountability and commitment to actually making a difference in your own life and watching that ripple out as a model for other people to jump on board with, without telling and poking and telling people how to do, to do their world. Like, I think if we can model that through our own ways of being and thinking and belonging, then that could be the change that we need, that internal piece.
Fully agree, and I take my hat off to those that do the practice.
Well, I'm just like trying to do a symbiotic chrysalis just for you. So this is really great conversation. We're going to move to the second last provocation, and we're going to roll a little quicker, just get to some momentum, but obviously slow down into deep time. Regenerative capitalism, such is the contradiction we live within. Regenerative capitalism, such is the contradiction we now live. And that's something that Glenn kind of sprinkled in my world a couple of weeks ago, really. And to speak to that, thank you, mate. But it's an exciting provocation because there's a book about it right now and Glenn's kind of into it and pulling it apart in pieces. So I'd love to know what your thoughts are around regenerative capitalism. I mean, we've got, waste, sustainability, regeneration, or regenerative. So we're thinking about those words that we use when we greenwash and all those kinds of things. So that's the things that I'm bringing into this conversation to kind of unpack and pull apart and deprogram. Yeah.
Can you define it for us first?
Oh, to regenerate. It's what lizards do when they lose their tails. They grow another one. So they regenerate an organic form that was similar to, but not identical to the one they had before. So the idea of regeneration is good. I love the idea. I'd love to grow bits of me that fall off as I get older. So regenerative, like sustainability.
What would you have? I'd have a tail. What would you have?
2 of them.
2? Why 2? How dare you?
They would
This is our relationship.
They would wag at each other.
Double wag. We talked about having a tail last night, didn't we, Ali? Wouldn't it be great? Yes, continue. Just a bit of fun to spice it up.
So to regenerate something is a good idea, but we are now living in a world which has, over the last 300 years, been afflicted by various forms of pollution, much of it intractable, which means impossible to get rid of, or impossible to get rid of over a time frame of thousands of years. Nuclear waste being the worst form of intractable waste. So the idea that we should regenerate, for me, it demands an answer to the question, what do you wish to regenerate? So in Australia, if we wish to regenerate the bush, do we regenerate the bush as it was in 1788. Do we wish to regenerate it as it was for the evolution of koalas? Proto-koalas were on the continent 25 million years ago. So where do we start and where do we stop? There are parts of the Amazon that have been recently discovered as an entire human artifact, cities, agricultural systems and gardens built by the indigenous people after invasion, colonization, genocide and massacres. We go to the Amazon now and what we see is a forest which is regrowth. It's not pristine, it's not wilderness in the strict definition of those terms. So to conclude, unless you answer the question, regenerate what, and then get agreement amongst those who are part of the regenerative process, we really aren't making much intellectual progress. In the Symbiocene, however, if you wish to regenerate, everything is okay. You can regenerate anything you like because the answer will always be, this is a good thing.
Thank you. That was unreal. This is a good thing. That's what we want.
So it's interesting for me being someone who's a business owner, very commercial practice. So when I hear you speak and I try and put it in context of my own business, especially in today's economic climate, especially when I'm buying goods and we've got the Strait of Hormuz increasing, my costs triple, I guess I need to regenerate cash. So especially when I'm trying to embody a zero waste practice and that machine costs me $200,000. So for me, the term regenerative capitalism is a bit of an oxymoron because yes, I want to be sustainable. I want to embody this practice and I try to do it through everything in my life as much as I can. It is really difficult, I think, to really define that for me, because when we spoke earlier and we talked about circular economy and things like that and regenerative capitalism possibly being, and correct me if I'm wrong, an offshoot of that. It's a challenge when you're trying to, you know, just run a business and be able to put these things. And I think it is so important that you are putting these provocations out and defining these and giving me further ways to think about these things because, you know, they are just so important for our forward thinking. And I hope that maybe through my theories that I'm proposing with my PhD about the future factory network, I'm also being able to put in these regenerative capitalist theories, but in that actual definition where capitalism unfortunately does have to become part of my reality as a business owner, you know? So yeah, but I think again, it's up to behavior change.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting point to go from, you know, the vision of the Symbiocene to the practice of it. And we were talking about that before. And it, you know, so many factors come into the process, which is a long process, but it still isn't long enough, even for the two of us making that. You know, there's life factors, there's health, there's well-being, there's money, there's backing, there's support networks. And that just kind of comes back to just a moment that I wanted to share with both Glenn and Ron in a conversation, and Sam as well. But you might have missed that because you had to opt out. We went a little late, as we always do when we talk. But we realized that we were kind of practicing the Symbiocene as a bunch of individuals with different skill sets and practices and processes. And I just felt like I wanted to mark that conversation as an example of another way to practice it, other than even having a business, even in your relationships. And, you know, we can't make great things by ourselves. We can't hold major visions and accomplish them by ourselves. In fact, I've been doing an MBE, a Masters of Business and Empathy, for a year with Small Giants. And part of my end kind of game was making roles of the Symbiocene and who they would be and what they would be and how they could intersect with a disaster, and when it gets hit from the side and all those roles can shift and change with 3 people having key roles and they can change and develop whatever they need to do as a task. So anyway, it was just fascinating for me to just think about then, like that other part, like there's the commercial aspect of the reality of real production and design and living and just fucking lifing right now, you know? And then there's this beauty and the vision holders that keep us in check with where we want to head and where we want to go to and keep us all aligned. And then people like Ron and, you know, Sam and Patricia, myself, who are like in our different fields and trying and testing and prototyping these ways, but we're all moving towards the same thing, which is a movement. And I feel like that's really great, and we should really celebrate that as well. Yeah. Sam.
Yeah, I'm keen to talk about this. Yeah,
Do you mind
regenerative.
talking up a bit, or just get the crew to turn you up?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Get into it, Samir.
Yeah. I think regenerative capitalism, really interesting theme. I think for me, capitalism, I've got a love-hate relationship with it. You know, as a small business that's received investment, I think, you know, it's essential for us to grow. And I think for me, the really interesting thing about capitalism is it's a free market. And so, you know, people can pursue their interests, and they can, you know, as Glenn was talking about, they can pick a project of what they want to regenerate, and they can start working at it. Whether you've got, you know, Patricia in the fashion space or myself in the kind of homewares product space. And I think my favorite thing about it is that you can pitch a dream to someone and you can say, I want to make this change and I need this much money, and you can get the funds for it before you've even done it. And I think for me, that's a beauty of capitalism, where you can make a promise to do something and then suddenly get all this energy and momentum about it. And at the same time, that same mechanism of free market means that you can have two identical products on the shelf, and they've got very different makeups of what's gone into them, and they get kind of equally assessed by someone who doesn't have enough time to quickly check which one they want. And so I think capitalism has enormous power for change because of that investment, I guess, potential, where you can sell a dream, but also it has the easy ability to be, I guess, misunderstood and misused. And so I think it's a powerful mechanism with the right moral compass and values behind it.
I feel like you want to respond to that, Glenn. Nodding, yes. Ron.
Yeah. It's a reality sort of thing, isn't it? There is a reality that we kind of fit into, and that's what we're all talking about. You know, there is a reality that we fit in, and we're used to the idea that we create it, this reality. We have created it somehow, and it needs to be recreated all the time. And it's, I mean, you know, I run a company, or my colleagues and I run a company of 150 people. Our cash flow through the office is quite phenomenal, and we need to do a lot of stuff to earn that money. We're now in the situation where, as part of a project in European cities, we have to assess whether it's worth doing the project or not. So we get paid a little bit of money to decide whether to get a big project or not, you know. And it's a weird reality, because we're likely to agree intellectually that the building should not be built. However, it's very hard to say no to a project that has a couple of £1 million worth of fees coming in if we do the project. So we're conflicted all the time. On the other hand, I'm trying to figure out sort of what this means, but there is famously in architectural press, journalists are not supposed to mention the word beauty. It's not talked about in architecture, cannot talk about beauty, which is a really terrible thing, because that's kind of what we're in the business of creating. but and that's why I'm engaging with Glenn, because I need to understand this depth of words and of thinking behind concepts. Why I'm engaging with Missy is because I think she knows something that I do not know, which is another element of the picture. You know, how creativity works, how what this beauty is, how it relates to the land, how it relates to culture. That is what sort of excites me. And I've started realizing that in our work, we ought to give the objects that we create, or the pictures that we create, or the words that we create, have to be part of this teaching. If you make a beautiful art object, the chrysalis behind you there, Missy, is a teacher. There are stories in there that need telling and that can complete the picture that you might not get from reading an A4 piece of paper that explains beautifully what you've tried to create. The words will be beautiful, but the object carries a whole different set of meaning, which I think sometimes is more powerful than the words. Sorry, Glenn. Sometimes sometimes the balance of the word and the image is kind of what works in people's psyche. That's why Instagram is so successful, because it combines image and words really well. So somehow this lesson needs learning. How does that relate to regenerative capitalism? I do not know. I think the idea is fabulous. It needs happening, but why would people do it? Until the moment they understand that they have a very meaningful relationship with the place that they are part of. Until that moment, is the project's not going to work. You know, capitalism is going to win. And it depresses me a little bit, but the work is educational. We need teachers. We need to learn.
I really love, yeah. Anything you want to add to that?
I think that closing line, right, about education, I mean, that is where it all is in all of this practice. I think it's understanding, and I think that's what's great about your work, is you're provoking that, you know, that conversation.
Just that there's good growth and bad growth. Children grow, that's good. It's associative, it's symbiosis, it's the maturation of potential. Potential is really important. Bad growth is dysbiosis. It makes us sick. It's symbiocidal. It leads to the extinction of symbiotic relationships between all systems of life. And so my vision is, and it may be regenerative in the sense of regenerative capitalism, that as the Symbiocene grows, the Anthropocene retracts. So I'm not arguing for the hair shirt view of the future. I'm arguing for an intensely active, creative future that's based on good growth at the same time as witnessing the decline of the last 300 years of that which is bad growth. And so I could live in a world of regenerative capitalism because I have no ideological objection to it, except that form of it, which is extractive, toxic, symbiocidal, and leads to our extinction. Well, who couldn't object to that?
Amazing. I also just wanted to add to that beauty element. It was so fascinating talking to Ron about how beauty isn't a value in architecture. I found that quite fascinating. As someone who makes beauty, I find it so undervalued. And I also believe that it is the kind of weaving material of the fibers, like the fascia between the visionaries and the practical and the systems and the stagnant and the logic. It's the fascia that story tells where we are, what we do, how we do it, and who doesn't love beauty? I think if we can find a way to have our ethics and our morals and our values aligned, our checks and balances there, and try to move towards a Symbiocene with beauty in mind. I think it's the best storyteller to bring everybody into, you know, into the revelry and the beauty of and to the fascination of what we're doing as designers and artists and makers and entrepreneurs and all of the things. So yeah, I just wanted to throw the beauty lens on that.
Drink to that.
And I think, you know, nature really shows us. I mean, there's nothing more beautiful in this whole courtyard than that tree, right? There is nothing that resonates deeper than that connection with that natural element there, and that shirt has just every day I see those leaves falling down and just it just dreamily falls to the ground, and I'm like, oh, and nothing makes my body feel that restored, you know. And I just wanted to honor, you know, Mother Nature in this moment as the entity that shows us the living intelligences that we are in and around, and how beautiful nature is, and she's the clear reflector of how we should be operating and moving forward, I believe, you know. So where to from now? This is the last provocation. Thanks for everyone for sticking with us. Quick shakedown. Quick shakedown. Where to from now? Towards a shift from maintaining systems to transforming how we participate with them. I think we were wanting to speak to things like interdependence and participation and relationship and I guess systems redesign and the Symbiocene. So yeah, so where to now? Towards a shift from maintaining systems to transforming how we participate with them. Take it away, amazing people.
I'd be happy to start.
Yeah, where are you shifting towards now?
I think, you know, everyone on the panel and everyone in the audience probably agrees that a change is needed. And I think for me, it comes down to, I think there's two categories that change falls into. I think there's tech and innovations. So, you know, new materials, new systems, new, you know, energy production or whatever it may be. And then there's values and morals and behavioral change. And I think there's some people who firmly believe that innovation is going to solve everything. I disagree. I think it definitely needs the values as well. And I think it also involves compromise, and anything, you know, worth changing and anything worth doing, anything worth doing is tricky. And I think the biggest barrier to sustainability and I guess symbiosis and, you know, stability for me is our reliance on comfort and our a kind of addiction to performance. And I think, you know, if we want to start to transition these things and we talk about natural materials, you know, it's really hard to immediately fly in a plane made of mushrooms. But, you know, eventually we'll get there step by step. And so I think, yeah, it's got to be a combination of both behavioral change and innovation. And I think also an acceptance that innovation isn't going to be the only way we can do it, and that we're going to have to accept that our lives might look a bit different, and that our day-to-day luxuries might not be the same in future generations.
I'd love to jump in on that too. I think the whole premise of my methodology, which is takes you through a sequence of disarm, disrupt, unite, play, perform, transform, and I'll talk about the perform deprogramming too in a second, is all about getting comfortable with discomfort. And I think that's a really big part of it's what Adapt New South Wales, the whole panel and the whole themes were about this year was comfort. And we were exploring that with all the speakers, the keynotes. And yeah, it's a really big thing right now to just like look around at what is really comfortable and how much that costs us and how to value that, and how can we reassess those things like 2 cars, you know, motorbike, all the things, and just, you know, bringing it back into that checks and balances of self, interpersonal work, interdependence, with nature. And for me, I am, you know, a lady came and popped her head in the back of the chrysalis yesterday, and she said, I don't really think that this artwork belongs in this space. And I went, that's cool. And I said, totally love that view and perspective. But I did check in with the tree first, and I asked her, and she said, pivot to the left and pop it down here. Because I did ask her for permission to be here on this land, and I have built a relationship with that tree for the last week. So I think there's like little things that we can do. It might sound wacky to people out there, but for me, when I'm designing something or building something, I'll go to my little sit spot and practice Dadiri, deep listening with deep time. And I'll ask Mother Nature what I should do and how I can best support her. And this is my process of doing that, and living that, and learning and tripping over and falling on my ass and my knees along the way. But I think for me, it's about always asking Mother Nature first what I need to do in support of her. So yeah.
But Missy, you understand that. You understand that, and that's why you need to. That's why you make art. That's why you show to people how it's done, and everyone in their field who is in a position to show how it's done needs to show how it's done.
Yeah.
And if you talk to people, you make an object, and you're careful. You talk to the tree before you put the object there. You know, I know quite a lot of people who will think that's a bit weird. You know, but if you tell the story and the story is not too complicated and quite well phrased and beautiful, then it might be understood by people who will then start to tell their own story they've learned something, you know, and this is I guess that's sort of where we need to go. I am a little bit concerned. I feel like I'm treading on far too many toes when I start talking about this, but I'll talk about myself. When I grew up, I was a young Catholic boy in the Netherlands, which was already a little problematic because we also had Protestant boys in the Netherlands, and they didn't like each other, so that was a problem. And I never felt that, but my dad felt that. You know, he went to the Catholic Church in a town that was mostly Protestant, and it was frowned upon. But I have started, and I denounced my religion when I was a teenager and felt that there was all sorts of stuff wrong with it. Anyway, what I'm very conscious of is that many of the sort of deeply ingrained cultural starting points that I work with and thrive that have made me are somewhat scripted in religion. And this is just because I'm a European, you know, and I've grown up in Christianity. It's not a weird thing, but I cannot imagine losing that. So there is some sort of spirituality that makes me love churches and church music and even Latin. The language, just spoken Latin language, to me is beautiful. And it's not because I understand it or anything. It's because it hits deep points inside me that is part of my comfort zone almost. And this spirituality is very meaningful, and somehow being conscious of that and inventing that a little bit might help the depth of understanding of people and their place in the world somewhat. I mean, I'm keeping this very abstract because I don't want to talk about religion, but I do want to talk about this sort of storyboard or something that people should carry with them that helps explain how to enjoy things, why the tree should be asked for permission.
Thank you, Ron. That's amazing. I'll get back to you on that. That's our next convo. Patricia.
Yeah, I think like what you're both saying, it's about tuning in. And I think
Yeah.
with all the noise and all the influence we have, it's really hard to find that time just to tune in, whether that's through, you know, religion in whatever aspect or talking to trees. I think people, it might be just sitting down quietly and staring into space with your morning cup of tea or coffee. I think it's just that tuning in. And back to what Sam was saying a bit too, I think the word we really need as well is convenience, you know, because I think as our lives get busier, our need for convenience really starts to overshadow those other things. And then we forget to tune in.
Yeah.
know?
Love that. Attunement. It's the master art of the methodology. Yeah, the art of attunement. And I think that's just an ongoing process personally and, you know, globally, really. How about you, Glenn? That's awesome. Thanks, P.
Solophilia, the love of working with other people to achieve a common goal, the politics of symbiosis, if you like. In fact, symbiosis as a word was used in the Middle Ages to describe the associations of agricultural workers like flax workers. So they were the symbiosis of flax workers. So another translation would be union. The union of flax workers was a symbiosis of workers. So I think we can bring back some of the older meanings, the social meanings of symbiosis. Solophilia, the love of working with others and achieving a common goal, is something that I think we've failed to nurture in our socialization and in our institutions. Solidus, whole, that's the origin of words like solophilia or solidarity. So we need to reclaim the public symbiosis, which was a term used in the Middle Ages in the early stages of capitalism. We need to restore or to rediscover the commons. The commons was once something that belonged to all, and we've spent 300 years subdividing it. So these are radical ideas that are based in the very foundation, meaning, and science of symbiosis. So I don't think I'm trying to argue for something which is a complete fabrication. I make a distinction between utopia, spelt with a U, and utopia, spelt with an EU. EU means good, a good future, as opposed to a utopian future, which is an impossible place, somewhere that we will never arrive at. So I think the words, the materials, the creativity, the union of people are the things that will win out over the alienation and isolation of the Anthropocene. So I'll leave it at that, because I'm sure that we can conclude in many ways, but that would be my philosopher's conclusion to where we need to go next.
Thanks so much, Glenn. So we're going to finish with a really exciting piece of Glenn's brand new book. When we had our last conversation about this conversation, it was really symbiotic and synchronistic and everything else. That there was just so many symbolisms. And what happened was Glenn said, wow, this artwork is amazing, blah. What is it called? And I said, well, it's a chrysalis. And it's about the imaginal goo. And he didn't like the word, we talked about the word goo. Anyway, the imaginal and what that is in that transition between life and death, cells turning from caterpillar into butterflies, which really represent that interpersonal work we need to do, and the repair and the care and the slowing down that we can do inside of the chrysalis as an interactive artwork. And it was so crazy because he'd just given we've talked about the book for quite a long time, this new book, which is so exciting. And we were going to have a party back in the Blue Mountains for it, and for sure with your wife, Jill, who's amazing poet, and your fam. And the last thing that he said was, the last part of my book, the last page is about the chrysalis. And I thought, wow, we're in it. We're in the flow. We're in the Symbiocene movement. We are together in our in our thoughts. And so we thought it would be really special to read the last part of your last page of the conclusion of your brand new book to everyone before its release. So what an honor to end with this beautiful, piece. Thank you, Glenn. Yeah.
My pleasure. This is a draft, that might not be the
It's
final.
always the prototype, right?
Okay. To have our babies enter the Symbiocene will be a blessing, promise. Where new forms of ritual greeting or secular baptism will announce their presence in the nested systems within which they live. Their symbio education then becomes the most important work on earth, and such socialization is like the process of metamorphosis in butterflies, where complex groups of cells called imaginal discs provide the basis for new organs and organic form as the consumer caterpillar cells disintegrate and the pollinating butterfly emerges. I have a new granddaughter. Her name is Wren, and she has all the imaginal discs inside her needed to mature and fulfill her potential. Wren, like all the newborns and the young people of the earth, relies on the current generation of adults to give her the love life, to metamorphose into a mature human being, able to live together, the symbiosis, with the rest of humanity and life on earth. Now is the time for the imaginal metamorphosis, and it will take us all into the Symbiocene, our only future.
Woo! Oh, amazing. Thank you so much to this incredible panel. I'm just enriched by this beautiful experience, and I hope that you all take away or absorb and embody some of the pieces that we've been blessed with to witness today, and the gifts of this new language that we are, moving towards the Symbiocene. So thank you to Patricia Chircop from KNOVUS. You can find her work on my website, UnitePlayPerform, and it will channel through to all of her amazing work that she does. We've got Ron Bakker on the screen. Thank you, from PLP Labs, Cambridge University, Architecture and Design. Yeah. Sam Davies from DEFY Design. Thank you so much for being here. And Glenn Albrecht, thank you so much for all of your time. And you can also see Glenn's work at the NGV. Tomorrow he's going to be talking about Symbiocene.
Wednesday.
What time is it?
Starts in the morning.
At the NGV?
At the gallery.
At the gallery, excellent. So you can find that on the website for Melbourne Design Week. So thank you so much. Come and have a chat to us if you'd like. We are here all week, and we have programs on a QR code, which is on the postcards on the top of that shrine. We've got some really great programs. Patricia's doing some offsite in her KNOVUS studio touring, and Played a Prototype and Embodied Emergence, which is all about making better decisions through in the body. So thank you so much. Have a beautiful Melbourne Design Week. Let's party up late.
Thanks, Missy.